Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. So today I want to talk about the best and worst books that I've read in 2020 so far. Now I know what you're thinking, Ashley, it's September. Aren't you about to do a best and worst of the year at the end of the year in like 3 months? And you would be absolutely correct. So let's start with the worst and then I will go to my best. So the first book that I read that was terrible was 50 Shades of Grey, and I actually have a full review up on my channel that I will link somewhere here and in the description below, so I'm not gonna get too into depth of how much I hated this book. Everybody has already put their 2 cents in, and I think it's kind of obvious why this book is bad, but just to reiterate, incredibly toxic relationship, bad representation of a community that the author did absolutely no research on but felt like she wanted to make the focal point of her story, terribly underdeveloped plot, characters, stalkerish tendencies, romanticization of some very disturbing behavior, using trauma as a plot device and an excuse for bad behavior, and I think that pretty much wraps it up. You can probably think of like a million more, but that summarizes it pretty well. Next is Welcome to the Dark Side, which is a motorcycle romance between a 17-year-old girl and a like 40-something-year-old guy, which is not why this is all bad in my opinion. So it's a little iffy, but what really makes it iffy is she met him when she was like 6 or so, and then he went to prison for an incident that she was involved in, and she sends him letters up until her 16th or 17th birthday. Then she's working at a bar that he purchases, and they start up a thing. So just aside from like the technical things of like a very weirdly paced plot, an underdeveloped plot, horribly boring, underdeveloped, annoying characters, the entirety of the book, he like calls her a child, and he talks about how he loved her before she became of age, and he like constantly talks about how he's like with a teenager and how sweet and innocent she is, and just a lot of weird stuff. He talks about just like how young she is, which I get technically she is almost or is an adult, and she can kind of make her own decisions, but it's just very uncomfortable to hear someone almost like fetishize that aspect of their relationship. It just was not great. I didn't love it. So next, in the same vein as 50 Shades, I read After, which again, there's thousands of opinions out there, so I'm not gonna beat a dead horse, but toxic relationships, emotional and mental abuse, just promoting things in romance or in a relationship that aren't healthy, that aren't good, that you shouldn't be romanticizing, that you should actually be warning people about, or at least talking about in like a, hey, this is not okay kind of way, which none of that happened, so, you know. And then I have one more romance on this list, and then I will go into my worst fantasy of the year. So the last romance that I want to talk about is The Kiss Thief. So this is written by LJ Shen. If you are not familiar with LJ Shen, she writes a lot of like dark taboo romances, and she is more notably known for her All Saints High series, which I read several of the books in that series and I enjoyed the majority of them. She kind of has a very formulaic way of writing. All of her more masculine characters tend to be exactly the same, and they all have like that irredeemable douchebag kind of personality that you eventually root for, I guess. And with The Kiss Thief, I felt like this trope was even worse, and I don't personally know how anything about the male main character was acceptable. I don't see any scrap of his personality that the female could have gotten over or could have latched onto that like would have made the rest of his behavior acceptable. This is like a arranged marriage situation between a mob boss's daughter and a senator, and he kind of blackmails her father into letting them get married. I say let very loosely, and she doesn't really want anything to do with it. And she is 17 and he is, I believe, 30-ish. And again, that's a little iffy, but she is, like, when I was 17, I was out on my own. I had graduated high school, like I was in college, I was making my own decisions. So that's iffy, but not, you know, in my opinion, horrible. The relationship itself was the horrible part. There were a lot of parts of this that I couldn't get past. So their first experience in the bedroom, I didn't like. Their cyclical, immature relationship of he's cheating on me, she's cheating on me was incredibly annoying and didn't befit a man of 30. And the other twist that happens about 70% of the way through is one of my least favorite tropes. I will link the vlog that I read this book in if you want some more information on this. I go into spoilers if you want to know exactly my thoughts, but just know that this was not good at all. And then the fantasy that I want to talk about is Three Dark Crowns. This book felt like a massive waste of time. The plot and the characters were massively underdeveloped. I felt like this could have been squished into maybe 100 pages and put into the second book, and it would have been perfectly fine. It wouldn't have made a difference. This felt very much like a setup for the next book, and there was a love triangle in here that I had a viscerally bad reaction to. I could not stand the romance in this. The characters are interchangeable. You could have taken one sister, replaced her with the other sister, and it wouldn't have made a difference. I oftentimes forgot who the sisters were, and the plot and world building were underdeveloped. Nothing happened in this book until almost like the last 70 pages, and this book is almost, if not more, than 400 pages. So it was just not good. I think that the idea behind it was pretty interesting. It's about three sisters, each who have like their own power, I guess. So one is a poisoner, she has an immunity to poison. One sister is an elementalist, and one sister is a naturalist. Don't ask me the difference because I couldn't tell you. And there's some like darker themes that are explored that I wish kind of had been more of the plot, and we had seen more of that. But once we got past like the initial darkness of their abilities, it kind of just fell off and became them walking around and talking about how they're going to train to kill the other sister because they want the crown, which is the whole plot of the story. And they introduced some really great plot points that I feel like would have made the ending fantastic, and they didn't use any of them, and it was just a waste of time. So those are the 5 worst books that I've read in 2020 so far. Hopefully at the end of the year, these are the ones I'm still talking about. Hopefully nothing knocks them out, because I just want good books for the rest of the year, but we'll see. So let's talk about the best of the year that I have read so far. So my 5 best thus far. So I have a lot of 5-star reads from this year, and it was kind of tough to determine which ones I felt like were the best, but these books I feel like just exemplified the best plot, the best characters, the best meaning behind the work, just so well written, and just good stories. So the first book that I want to talk about is My Dark Vanessa. This is an incredibly hard read. I'm sure you've heard of it before, but it is the story of a 15-year-old girl who is groomed and abused by her teacher when she is at a private school, and the subsequent years of consequences that she is dealing with. And in the present, when she's around 30 or so, she discovers that there is a girl coming out with these accusations of abuse against him, and she wants Vanessa to speak out as well. But Vanessa has always felt as if the relationship was based on love and it wasn't abuse. And so we see her kind of grappling with the truth of the relationship, and we're also flashing back to the past, reliving these things that she's gone through. So as you can imagine, this is an incredibly hard story. Also doesn't shy away from anything. You are in her head during some really tough times, but I think that this was beautifully written. I was I got physically uncomfortable at this book. I had very real reactions to it, and I think that is the marker of a great book. You really just wanted to protect Vanessa. You wanted to scoop her up and take her out of these situations and just protect her. But it also showed a lot of like the cycles of abuse, of survivors becoming abusers themselves, and just a lot of struggle. I thought the ending was very realistic, and it just was a fantastically written story. And I would recommend all of these books on this list, but I would highly recommend this one if you can deal with kind of like the sensitive topics discussed. I still think about it to this day, and it's just a fantastic read and so well done. So my next best of 2020 is The Bluest Eye. This is a stunning story. It is multiple POV, and it's following the people that have influenced this young girl's life. She is a Black girl that kind of just wants to fit into society's standards of beauty. She wants the blonde hair, the blue eyes, and the white skin, and the story is really so much more than that. You're following her life through the eyes of friends and adults in her life, and I think what Toni Morrison does in this story is she takes like these villainous characters and she gives them a backstory, and she makes them very human. So even though she's not condoning or saying that what they're doing or what they did is okay, you are seeing the impact that the things that they went through had on their lives, and how it shaped the way that they now react to our main character, and how that kind of shapes her, and so on and so forth in the cycle of trauma. It also tackles things like abuse, and it tackles colorism and racism and society's standards of beauty, and just a bunch of really hard topics, but it is so fantastic, and I want everyone to read it. It is so good, and I am so excited to pick up anything else by Toni Morrison. I think that she is able to pack such a punch into so few words, and it's just this was so good. So next on this list is Black Girl Unlimited. This is a part realism, fictional realism, part memoir, and this also deals with a lot of the similar topics that were discussed for My Dark Vanessa and The Bluest Eye. We are dealing with poverty, we are dealing with racism, a lot of sexism, we are dealing with abuse, drug addiction. We're basically following this girl's life, Echo Brown, but she's also a wizard, and it plays a very minimal role, but the kind of way that Echo Brown, the author, crafts this world and describes the coping mechanisms for the abuses that our main character experiences, and she uses the magic to explain how the human mind can basically protect you and try to do its best to get you through some of the really tough things that you can go through. But this was just really beautifully written. I don't think I've ever read anything quite like it. She does a fantastic job of just tackling some really hard topics. She doesn't shy away from any of the hard topics. You are in the character's head during some really traumatic experiences, so just be aware of some of the trigger warnings that I mentioned in the beginning, and go into this kind of grounding yourself, and you know, just keeping in mind that these three books are very tough reads, but they are exceptional and well worth it. So the next book that I want to talk about is kind of a more lighthearted read, and I absolutely adored it, and that is Birthday Girl by Penelope Douglas. It's actually right there. This is an age gap romance between Pike and Jordan. Pike is Jordan's boyfriend's dad, and when Jordan and her boyfriend lose their apartment, they move in with Pike, and a relationship forms between Pike and Jordan. The age gap is he is 39 and she is 17. I loved everything about this book. I have mentioned this book in several other videos, including the video that I talk about the Kiss Thief in, so I won't go into too much about this, but the relationships that Penelope Douglas builds in this book specifically are just astounding. You never question why this couple wants to be together or how they fit. She really makes their beliefs and their kind of outlooks and their desires mesh very well while making them their own individual person with their own individual needs and desires. She just writes characters so well, and I think that the plot was seamless. I think that the emotions of the characters are easy to feel and understand, and it's just incredibly well done, and I would really recommend it if you are into romance at all. And then the last book I want to talk about was probably the most shocking book that I have read this year, and that is Beast of Extraordinary Circumstance. So this is the story of Waylon, who was orphaned and raised by wolves, and he seems to kind of possess this magical ability, but we don't really know if he knows that he has this ability. So this is kind of told in the same way that The Bluest Eye is, through multiple POVs of the individuals in his life that he has affected as he's passing through town to town to town. You never really get his viewpoints, so you don't really know what's going through his head, how he does all of these things. He can control the weather, he can do just all of these extraordinary things, and from our point of view, he doesn't really know he can do this. But this is just a really whimsical, beautifully written story, and Waylon himself was fascinating. I think that I could have read 300 more pages of him or a whole series of him because I just wanted more. I wanted to know more about his abilities. I wanted just more information. I wanted to see more. And there's a very sweet romance that is kind of the central plot, but I think that the amount that it was put in was the perfect amount, and I didn't want any more. It just was a beautifully done book, and I loved it a whole lot. So those are the best and worst books that I have read so far. I will do this video again at the end of the year in like 4 months, so look out for it then. But this year has been a very good reading year for me. I have read over 160 books. I am really grateful for the experience of this channel and just the reading experience that I've had this far. I started this channel in January. It's been a really great outlet for me. I went a really long time, so like elementary through high school, I read nonstop. I loved books. But when I got out of high school, I was in a headspace that books just really weren't helping me, aside from like my more comfort reads. But I discovered BookTube fairly recently, within the last 2 years, and it just sparked my love of reading again, and it sparked the desire to find people that I could talk about books with, because there's no one really in my life aside from my mom who avidly reads and who I can talk about books with. So this has just been a fantastic experience for me, and I thank every person who views my channel, who views any of my videos, who, you know, just comes and enjoys my content. And if you subscribe, I think that's awesome. But yeah, I think it's been a great year for my reading, not life or the world or anything like that. But I appreciate all of you guys who are here, and I hope you will stay with me through the end of the year and the years to come. Comment down below how your reading year has been, what your best and worst were, if any of the best and worst of my lists are on your list as well. I would love to hear it, and I will see you guys in my next video. Thanks so much.